So this is Chocolate Sunday Part 11. Actually, it's the conclusion of my autobiography, Chasing Rainbows, and I'll just transcribe this. Um, I'm completing the story on inheritances, um, and I was talking about, I talked about McCarthyville, the house my dad bought for his parents' lifetime that was supposed to come onto us girls. And I talked about the farm, which was given to one of five daughters for fear that the other four of us would claim our share and force a sale, force the farm to be broken up or whatever, which was never true. We would never would have done that. And then I talked about the house, the land I was given, and then it was taken back. And I was just saying that I went there with a Christian friend in the year that it stood empty before they sold it on. She and I went there and we marched around the house 7 times, like, like the walls of Jericho. And we prayed and just prayed that it wouldn't be sold and somehow the feud would be resolved and I'd get my house. Um, and funnily enough, as we prayed, this friend Monica just kept having a real sense that there was protection over my parents. She just kept seeing angelic presence around my parents. My parents live in Sharon's bungalow, as it was. Um, and as we were walking around my bungalow, which is on the same field, no, it's not a bungalow, mine's a villa. As we were walking around praying, that somehow the feud would be resolved, Monica just kept saying, "There's angels all around your parents' house. There's protection." And actually, that was probably a good thing because um, before I go on to talk about that, whilst we were walking around like two mad yokes, praying around my house, the estate agent turned up, actually, Ursula Farrelly, with people to view the house. I don't know if it was the people that finally bought it. It was advertised at €260,000 in the height of the property boom in Ireland. It's probably got negative equity on it now. And I just said to her, "It's not for sale." And she was horrified. I actually said it, I wasn't rude, but I was just very firm and said, "This is my house. This is not for sale. I don't know. There's a family feud. It will be resolved. Please go away." And she did go away, looking very alarmed. And then regarding where my parents were and where Monica kept saying there's angels all around that house, there's protection on that house, my dad has been threatening on and off for the last couple of years to burn it to the ground, the house that belonged to Sharon, because he says there was a dodgy deal done on him. I'm not sure if I talked about this in a previous DVD video, but basically the same way he'd come to me and said, "I'll give you 4 acres if you let me give the farm to Anne-Marie," he'd also gone to Sharon and said, he says that he didn't do this, but actually it rings true. My dad did a lot of deals like this and went back on them. And the only difference with Anne-Marie and Sharon is that they were just a bit cannier and didn't leave him room to go back on his deals. So the deal on the bungalow that Sharon used to own and that she went home on, I think I did mention this briefly actually, was that we all understood that Anne-Marie bought it off her for my parents to retire in so her and Phil could take over the farm, because they tried living together and it didn't work. But Sharon says no, Dad did a secret deal with her, Dad and Mom, that they would pretend she was selling it, but in actual fact it would still be hers and they would just live in it for their lifetime. So the 70,000 that Sharon was paid by Anne-Marie, which we thought was the purchase price, or Sharon says no, that was just rent in advance. Nice little rent. Nice if you can get it, rent your house out for, I suppose it'll be 15 years living in it by the time they either move into the town or die. They're like 86 and almost 80, 86 and 79. So, and Sharon says no, it's still hers, but she's never acted like a landlord. She's never maintained it. You know, they built, my dad built stables on, he built kennels on, he fenced, he landscaped, my mother landscaped. Um, but Sharon, when Dad said, Sharon, you know, you've had the money and I want the deeds, she just was like, no, you're not getting them, it's my house. That wasn't the deal we made. And he swears blind that that was the deal and that he was going to just give her an extra 10 or 20 grand in the will, in the division of her bungalow, which was all my parents have left now that Emery's got the farm. And no, she's insistent it's hers. The only thing that Dad has left is a field, a 4-acre field, which Nicky's already got his eye on. Nicky's already renting it and planning on buying it, which will devalue Sharon's bungalow enormously, because what's the point of a bungalow, you know, on an acre with stables and kennels if the 4-acre field beside it, which for the horses, is gone, is sold? It's crazy. So since Dad, the last 2 years since Dad discovered that Sharon really wasn't going to hand over the deeds, transfer ownership, whatever, in return for her 70,000, he's threatened to burn it to the ground, and he had petrol drums stored up, and you know, that was his mantra. He still says it sometimes, and he's told my mum he'll climb up on the roof and dismantle the house tile by tile and brick by brick, and you know, it's a source of great rage to him. But I did try and help him go to court over that, even though he'd, you know, even though I bottled out going to court over getting my house back and having him keep his word to me. I was helping him take Sharon to court to release ownership of the bungalow that she'd been apparently paid for. But she finally got in touch with me and told her sisters, finally, this secret deal. See, secrets are so toxic. She told us this secret deal, and it just rang true with me. I just thought, well, there's no way Dad would have offered me 4 acres and offered Sharon nothing, because we were the 2 sisters that also came home. Kathy and Fiona never did live here, but I've been home, well, back and forth for 30 years, but permanently home since 1996. And Sharon worked on the farm for a few years when they first set it up, so there's no way he would have offered me a sweetener and not offered Sharon something. So it just rings true with me that that deal, unfair as it was, but it was done, you know. So Sharon could view the 70 grand either as a payoff for Anne-Marie getting the farm, or as rent in advance for her parents living in her home with no commitment and no responsibility on her part. So it's unpleasant all the way around. It's just not nice. I wrote to the sisters and said, and to my parents actually, I gave them a copy and said, you know, all that they've got left to do the right thing with is this 4-acre field. And technically that belongs to Kathy and Fiona and myself, because Dad had said, whichever of you don't have the farm, there's always an acre each to build on. You know, and at first Phil and Emery had said that the apartment above the farm was always there for us girls as well, but that didn't pan out either. They didn't want, well, certainly I never felt welcome on the land. They would welcome the sisters from England because it was a short stay visit, but they certainly didn't make me or my children feel welcome, and Kathy stopped visiting, Fiona rarely visits. You know, and that was my biggest argument with Phil and Emery about the farm. It wasn't that I wanted it. I'm not a farmer. I just wanted it to still be our family home and always be a place of welcome, and always be a place that the grandchildren could all run around and feel that, you know, this was the family farm. That dream didn't come to pass. So we prayed, marched around the house 7 times. Monica kept sensing protection over the bungalow. Yeah, and I think Dad's, you know, when I dropped the court case against Sharon, well, it wasn't me taking her to court, it was my dad, but I was helping him. And his brothers took him to solicitors in Waterford who advised him that it was going to be very expensive and he'd be better to negotiate a deal with Sharon, and family feuds were so hard to resolve, and You know, you could spend thousands on them. And Uncle Tony had said he would foot the court bill, the legal bills. But when push came to shove, he didn't, you know. And then he made an attempt at resolving it with Sharon and said, look, you know, we must be able to work something out. And Sharon apparently wrote a letter and said, all right, I'll give my sister something out of it when I sell it. But then she reneged on that and said, no, I'm not going to go back on the deal my parents made with me. I'm not going to be forced into feeling guilty or whatever, you know. So, the house in Dungarvan, my cousin got and sold, and my house, there's strangers living in it, and Sharon's house that apparently our parents had been bought turns out to be still Sharon's house, so presumably her daughter will get it and sell it, and it's just hard pills to swallow. It's, you know, my mum came from quite wealthy stock in England, middle class I suppose, but she inherited, I think her godmother didn't leave her. She had two godmothers, and one cut her out of the will for marrying an Irish Catholic, and left the house to her parents and said, I was going to give it to Dorothy, but I won't. I don't approve of her marriage or her faith change, because Mum converted from Protestant to Catholic. So Mum's parents sold that house in Manchester, and I think they gave Mum and Dad enough to take us kids on a holiday. I think we went to Tenby in Wales, but the other godmother left Mum money she inherited from her own mother, and that caused a feud in her family. Her sister and her didn't talk for 12 years. Her brother and sister didn't talk for 7 years, I think it was. You know, because my nana, my English nana, died intestate, which I think is quite a spiteful thing to do. It's kind of a cop-out. Yeah, I would really encourage people to write a will, because yeah, Mum and her sister fell out for 12 years. I think they only had like a deathbed reunion when Auntie Sylvia was, you know, dying. You know, and then like one of the things my mum fought for in that inheritance that caused some of the rows in their family was a symphonium, very, very rare, beautiful, wind-up brass records with all holes in them that made the most amazing music. And I'd loved it as a child. I was my nana's favourite in England. I was the only one she'd have to stay. I don't know why, it's not fair, but there you go. That's probably where my mum got this thing of having favourites from her mother, you know, and pitting one child against the other. And so I hoped I would get the symphonium, not for commercial value. And then my mum was going to give it to her first granddaughter, who she's since cut out of the will altogether, because Louise went to court and took my ex-brother-in-law to court for molesting her as a child. So Mum just threw her out the family and cut her out of the will. So when Louise was going to get the symphonium, I said, oh, I'll just buy it back off her, Mum. I love it. I've always loved it. And so Mum says that was the reason she then went and sold it. So it's the thing our parents accused us that we might do, you know, that we might sell the antiques, or we might split the farm up, split the land up. They did. You know, my mum sold everything that moved. She sold it at Sotheby's, and you know, which to me is just a tragedy. You know, I don't know, it just seems to me sad. So, she sold the Waterford Crystal, which Fiona had always loved and wanted. She sold the record collection. I mean, you know, we all grew up listening. Mum loved music. We all grew up listening to the records. So it's like, why would you go and put them in the auction? Why would you do that, you know? She had a collection of antique plates that I was always the one that loved antiques. She sold those in the auction. It was just like horrible. My mother benefited from several inheritances. No, she always put them into our home, wherever we might be living. She always, you know, would do some major remodelling or upgrade, and, you know, she was generous in that way. So I don't understand, my mother having benefited, and she's also due to inherit from a brother, but she's got all that earmarked for just one of her daughters. I'm not it. The two youngest daughters are the ones that have cleaned up in our family. So, but the point is, if my mum knew how great it was, how lovely it was to just receive an inheritance and think, well, yeah, I miss that person, I love them, and how lovely that I'm able to do X, Y, Z, with the money. My mum admits to that, and yet she's determined to spend everything they have left. She would cash everything in it. She would sell the field. They even talked about selling the 4-acre field, that the only thing they've got left. And it wouldn't be so that they could say, look, we want to right some wrongs, or no, it would be to spend, 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 because she says, oh, it's only money, I can't take it with me, and I don't want to leave a penny behind me. And it actually says in the Bible, in Proverbs 13, I think it is, that a good man or woman leaves an inheritance not just for their children, but for their children's children. And it's just, if it's something, I just think it's the right thing to do. And it's not about the money, because us kids were never the ones that wanted to cash in. It's all about, for me, it's about being equally valued, equally loved. I suppose life isn't fair. That's probably, there's a couple of parables in the Bible that I try and tell myself off with. There's one where people got hired in the morning to do some work, and then worked all day and got paid a certain amount. And there were other people that were only hired for the last hour's work, and the boss paid them the same amount. And the workers that had worked all day said, that's not fair. Why did they get the same as us? We've worked since 8 this morning. And God said, it's up to me. You were happy with the wage I hired you at. It's up to me who I pay what. It's my money. It's my wealth. So, that parable's there for a reason. And there's another one. Can't quite bring it to mind right now. I don't know, but there's also like the prodigal son, because this is another thing. My mother's like Hitler-like in her selection of which daughters deserve marks of approval. And being married is a good start. Being divorced is not. Working is another good start. And I was the big hope. I was most educated of my siblings, and my mum was living her life vicariously through me, and I showed great promise. And then I got pregnant, and kind of made a choice that, especially as I was a single parent, I was married for 9 years, but for most of my life I've been a single parent. I chose parenting to be my number one priority. I know there are women, my daughter included, that try to combine parenting with full-time work, but for me, especially having run a daycare in California for 3 years and seen the price the kids pay for having full-time working mothers, I personally chose, no, if I've got children, I'm going to make them my priority. I've always done something. I've always been on the Parents Association or the Residents Association, or run a charity, or written and done book reviews or freelance writing. I've always done stuff, and like when I was married, I worked with my husband in his business, but parenting was my priority, and that was just my choice, but it didn't meet with my mother's approval. So anyway, I'm not even going to go into the criteria that there are to be her favourite or her favoured one, but it's at odds with the prodigal son parable, where there's two sons and one cashes in his inheritance early and goes off and squanders it, and then comes back and is welcomed home and absolutely celebrated and brought back into the family fold and rejoiced over. And the hard-working brother that always was at home was giving out, like, why have you been making such a fuss of him? I've worked all the years that he's been gone squandering his inheritance. I've worked. And yet he's the big hero and the big star. And he was chastised in that parable for, it was always all yours anyway. So, I don't know. I try and make sense of it. The bottom line is I've let it go. I've had to. It's destroying. It destroys the soul to actually hang on to injustice. And I know that, life's not always fair. And God's my provider. And somehow he'll make it up to me. I'm not, I'm a bit naive about money making. I'm not a tycoon. I could have made lots of money if I'd been a bit more focused or cutthroat. I might have inherited some of my dad's thing about not feeling worthy to own great wealth, which is foolish. I must reverse that. So it was never about, it was always about, well, I love the Symphonium, or I had a dream of living beside the farm, all the cousins running around together and helping my parents in their old age and so on. Oh gosh, where are we? 21. Oh, I think I've gone over time. Let's just